Hey, what's up guys, it's Oakley, and we're back playing Medieval 2. I can't tell you how much I love this game. Just the time period, the way the units stack up, the way cavalry is all but too crucial, and just the synergy you need to have with all your units. I'm really digging it. So hopefully I can see you guys online. I've already had the pleasure of playing with a couple of you online. So I'm going to be playing as France. Let's go ahead and put this on maybe... Oh, well, might as well put it on pause. Anyways, going over the armies. So in the front, I've put mounted sergeants followed up by peasant crossbowmen. The thinking behind this is I like having really cheap cavalry guys, and they'd make a good screen for your own missile units, because they can, basically, if you have a missile on missile fight, these guys can kind of dart around the sides, force your opponent back, all the while you have these guys taking pot shots at the enemy. If he decides to charge with cavalry, you can intercept with these cheap mounted sergeants, keep getting shots off, and that'll bide you time to allow your own cavalry to react. So this is a good way to guard your own peasants, maybe even better than having spearmen, although don't have spearmen too far. So I have two sergeant spearmen positioned around the flanks. In the center I have religious fanatics. These guys are cool units, pretty high attack. I'm not sure what weapon they're using, but very high attack. Pretty good morale, but really low armor, so they're kind of like meat shields, but very good on the charge, almost like the Fox units that you have in Rome 2, and they kind of function like Nodachi in Shogun 2, where they have nice attack stats, but not very good at sustained melee. And then behind them I have three of these armored sergeants, so I brought actually a lot of heavy spearmen, because I knew my opponent was using Byzantine Empire, which is notorious for cataphractoi. We'll go over that shortly. Actually, let's put it on play. And then in the back I have two dismounted feudal knights, so two swordsmen, and then three on this right flank. So I'm tending to think I'm going to edge a bit more on this side with my swordsmen. And in the back I'm keeping my cavalry at a distance. Let's go ahead and look at my opponent, and then I'll tell you how my train of thought usually goes in these battles. So in the front, he has four of these archers. In the back, he has a combination of Byzantine spearmen and Varangian guard. And behind those, three more Byzantine spearmen. And then he's sending his cataphractoi. These are basically, the Byzantine Empire is obviously the sort of the... How do we put this? I guess the successor of the Roman Empire when it split east-west. These guys adopted the more eastern approach to cavalry. You started seeing a lot more use of the heavy cataphract type units, becoming very standard in the Byzantine army. So these guys are very formidable, high attack, charge, armor, everything. They can really deal death to your infantry, especially your cav. So he has an advantage in cavalry. He also has an advantage in skirmishing potential. And look what he's doing right here. He's going to bolster his cavalry ranks with spearmen on both flanks. So he knows that this is going to allow him to gain the upper hand. And then over here he has his own scouting cavalry units. Instead of using sort of my light cav unit that I had positioned in the front, he's going to be using a light cav unit that is actually a missile unit. So let's go ahead and pause this so I can explain to you my thinking on this. So I know he has, as I put it, a cavalry advantage and a skirmisher advantage. So when it comes to cavalry advantages, the best way to counter cavalry is try and get him to waste his charge. So that's where these light cavalry come in hand. I can charge into his guys, rob him of his charge, and then strike from the back with my other cavalry. And then also having some spearmen. So that's what I'm doing on this flank, pushing forward with two spearmen and one crossbowman, and then some cavalry backed up by these dismounted feudal knights. The crossbowmen are positioned in this group to take some pot shots at his men. Even though he has a skirmisher advantage, they're all concentrated in the center, so I'm going to go ahead and strike where he doesn't have any where he doesn't have any archer units. So that's going to be sort of giving myself skirmishing advantage by positioning my troops where I can have that advantage. So just because your opponent has it on paper, it's really all about where you deploy them. So to counter his cavalry and spearmen, I'm going to put my own cavalry, spearmen, and archers. So because I have a better mix, I can take on that wing. And on the left, I see he has a pretty good balance of cataphractoi, skirmisher cav, and then spearmen. So to counteract that, I'm going to have feudal knights, but I'm not going to be deciding to attack. What I'm going to do instead is just position these guys on the defensive. Hold on, we're getting a little bit of some problems with this. Okay, it's a little stuttery after the last patch of Medieval 2. But my thinking is I'm going to try and push out my cav here, and when you don't have a cavalry advantage, keep in mind you don't actually have to charge. Force your opponent to come in, and by doing so you can force him usually through the use of some skirmishers. So for instance, my crossbowman here, getting some shots off against his skirmisher cav, and my sergeant spearmen, who are just here for, you know, cannon fodder, are going to soak up the fire, and just by being able to take out his skirmishers, I'm then going to be able to put some pressure on his own cataphractoi. I'm also using my cavalry here to try and bait his other cav to move in. I'm preemptively sending forward my skirmishers over on this flank. I anticipate a response from his cataphractoi. There we go. Here he's coming in, but I have skirmishers in the vicinity just to ward those guys off. Meanwhile, these guys are going to get some shots off right at his cataphractoi. So at all points in time, I'm going to try and do as much damage to those guys as possible. I also moved in more of these feudal knights to guard these peasant crossbowmen. I knew this spearman had to be over here to guard my cav. This weakened these guys, so I have to support them in some manner. Now, my opponent is getting away from his core. I know that's going to be his vulnerability. His army functions best when it's working together. Cavalry superiority holding down the flanks. Skirmishers basically just taking a toll on my guys. What he should be doing is moving this big line forward, forcing my guys to either, you know, deal with the death dealt from his skirmishers or fall back. If I fall back, then he can just keep pushing me into a corner and pushing forward slowly with this cavalry wing. I can't really engage this just because if he had the support of his archers, he could do lots of damage to my cav and also send forward some of these additional spear guys and whatnot. So what he should be moving is with all of his guys together. From my point of view, I know that he's not, and so I have to exploit that. The way I'm going to do that is sort of force an engagement on this flank. I move my crossbowmen up pretty close. I got some early volleys off. You can see I killed a decent amount of his cataphract. These crossbowmen have really good armor penetration. He's going to decide to countercharge my guys. But again, because I'm using these light cav, that's fine. He can waste an entire charge from cataphractoi into these light cav. They'll hold up for a while. They won't win, but they'll hold his guys up. Meanwhile, he's splitting apart his spearmen. They're going to try and hold this up, and he's going to try and swing around with his cataphractoi on this side. But I have my own spearmen, and I have more reinforcement units. I anticipated this assault, so I sent more reinforcements on this side. So look at how I'm sending my guys. Sergeant spearmen to even up this fight. Then more armored sergeants to intercept these Byzantine spearmen. And then also some dismounted feudal knights who I'm going to be sending into the fight to eliminate these guys. So he's really getting too separated, and I'm using sort of integral use of all my forces to counteract his moves here. Now, as I said, I'm going to counter this appropriately with first my sergeant spearmen who are going to be moving out. They're going to intercept his cataphractoi. He'll get some initial damage off, but spearmen in the long run will be able to take out his guys. And then armored sergeants moving in to finish off the kill. That is because they can defeat spearmen and also cavalry at close range. And over here I feel like I can take this on pretty well. Now take a look at what's happening next. My opponent realizes that there's engagements on both sides and I can just pour in the support, so he's going to decide to move up. On this flank he's going to be doing the same thing as well, because I've been able to take out just clumps of his guys at a distance with crossbowmen. He's going to decide to do something about that, so he's pushing forward. But this is where I've massed all of my cavalry. So again, it's all about positioning and having local superiority. In the center, take a look at what I do. Because he's on the move, his archers aren't positioned to fire. That's exactly when you want to charge. So I realize both his wings are tied up. That wing is about to be engaged, so I charge forward with all my guys. Take a look at how I position my men as well. In the front, the first guys who, if my opponent decides to get shots off, the first guys who are going to take the fire are going to be these religious fanatics, very lightly cheap armed, cheap guys, who they'll be my meat shields. They'll soak up all the fire, and if they get through, that's good. You know, they have high attack, so they do a pretty good amount of damage to the front ranks. And then I'm sending in a huge cluster of these dismounted feudal knights all together in a compact, almost right hook, a fist of like steel and mail and just heavy armor pouring into this right flank. That's where I'm going to try and collapse it. And I'm going to leave all of his left flank pretty much unengaged until I can win this battle. So that's again using local superiority, breaking through with superiority on this flank, and then reinforcing with a heavy right hook, landing it on that edge. And then behind my fanatics who anticipate losing, I don't want him to be able to just, you know, flow through that gap and attack either of my flanks. That's why I have some armored sergeants to plug that gap. Over on the left, he's grown weary of my crossbowmen taking the action to him, so he's going to charge forward with his spearmen to try and hold me back. That's not a good move on his part. He should be keeping them together with his cav, mostly because If those guys are engaged with my spearmen, that's fine, they kind of cancel each other out. I can quickly land a strike with these feudal knights, take out his spearmen, and then 3 of my cavalry can easily take out 2 of his cav. So we'll see just how that turns out. What I decide to do is, look at this, I know he's, let's explain this thinking. So I know he's targeting my spearmen, so what I decided to do was redirect them over to this cavalry fight, charge in with my feudal knight here, and then send in, so spearmen and feudal knights will take out his cataphracts. And instead of sending all my cavalry here, what I decided to do is just double envelop this spearman unit. Because he's targeted here, he's not going to be ready for this charge. And because I get this double assault from my cavalry, it's going to quickly break these guys. So without, maybe 1 or 2 losses here or there, I'm able to break an entire spearman unit. And just because of the efficacy of that move, now my cavalry are free to not only kill that unit, but now sweep around and finish off his cav, who are otherwise engaged with spearmen and feudal knights. So that's probably a more efficient way than keeping my spearmen here. That engagement would have lasted a while, and my cavalry would have been tied up for too long. This is a much better way to clean up this fight, and it frees up way more of my troops. I even have my general's bodyguard, who can go and chase off his cav. These guys, as I said, are going to pour in and just take out his units one at a time. This last unit is sort of left to fend on its own. If I were him, I would try and pull him back, or at least draw away as many guys from the fight as possible. You can see, because his troops were still in the move, basically his archers are only just now getting their shots off. He got a couple volleys concentrated on these forces, but that's fine. They're still going to pour through. His Varangian Guard, these really high guys who are, really wanting to tear into heavy infantry, they're going to be tearing into some light infantry. So it's going to be sort of like a hot knife through butter, but it's going to be wasting all its power on these meat fodder units. Over here, his dismounted Byzantine Lancers won't hold up to these specific feudal knights, who now have really numbers on their side, so I'll be able to crash through this wing. Combine that with the fact that I deployed enough reserves here to really clean up this flank, and that's going to allow me to not only win this fight just because of superiority, but also swing around and help with the envelopment. Also, keep in mind, look at this, look at the movement I'm doing with my troops. I realized I didn't have to engage all of them, just enough to hold. This other dismounted knight is going to wait back here for the time being to see if there's any breakthroughs. The other one is looping around, and he's going to help with the engagement around the flank. So cavalry are they're going to soon help to take these guys out. Byzantine spearmen here, who would have held up my cavalry, are going to be engaged with my swordsmen, so that's ideal for me. In the center, look at this. He's quickly going to chop through my men, but we're doing a decent amount of damage. This is exactly what he's doing, which is good, which is sending these generals bodyguard around the flank, and he's going to try and hammer and anvil his way, break free of what I've done here, which is holding up his center, and try and relieve those forces. However, because of the advantage I was able to get on this wing, I chased him off with just 1 feudal knight and 1 sergeant spearman against his cataphractoi. And the rest of my cavalry are returning to the fight, and you'll see what I do. I engage some of these Byzantine spearmen, try and hammer and anvil them. Let me just fix this frame rate a little bit. So let's go fast forward, slow, fast forward, pause. Sorry, it's freaking out a little bit. I'm getting some really low frame rate. But anyways, let's go ahead and analyze this while we can. But here, where he would have had his cavalry charging into the back, look at this. My cavalry, who came back to save the day, essentially stopped him from doing so. What would have been a continuous hammer and anvil up the rear of this already really wavering front. I was able to intercept them with my cav and prevent that from happening. Over on this flank, I took my dismounted feudal knights and just kept swinging them around the flank, and it's causing an all-out collapse on all fronts. So I think this strategy that I employed worked pretty well. My opponent had the advantage in the skirmisher department and cavalry department, but he squandered it. I was able to use local superiority to my advantage. So I hope this tactic helps you out. Now, if you're wondering how my opponent could have fought better, or how you could probably beat someone who's trying to employ the style that I am, what I would say is if he just, take your core, where he had a lot of those skirmishers, and just use that as a wedge that he drives forward. He had a good line of spearmen in the front, so he should have just kept pressing that advantage, engaging with me with his skirmishers, and kept his cavalry by his side. He should have just kept them kind of stationary. Those cataphractoi would have been huge bodyguards for the flanks of his army. They should have swatted away any attempts at my cavalry from charging around the sides. And then by having this long line of spearmen in the front, as well as these heavy Varangian Guard, he could have chopped through any of my forces coming through the center, as well as the fact that if he deployed his archers in a staggered position, maybe 2 out in front of his lines and then 2 behind his lines, he could have kept a continuous wall of fire on my guys, you know, peppered my cavalry, peppered my crossbowmen, really negated all my armor and specifically targeted my troops. He should have held out, and on the flanks he should have attacked my own French nobility, who tried to go around the flanks with his cataphractoi, supported with skirmishers, and I think he would have cracked my center, and then on the flanks he would have fought it to a standstill. Cataphractoi probably would have won in the end, and then he could have done what I'm doing right here, which is land some nice hammer and anvils on my cluster of troops that would have been in the center. But what happened is he decided to attack piecemeal, and I took that to my advantage, and really ended up, as you can see here, wrecking his men. And these cavalry charges into the back of infantry are what's going to win you the day. Not cavalry against cavalry, it's cavalry striking the rear of infantry that's really going to do the most damage, so you want to kind of position yourself the whole battle to be able to land those types of strikes. And then there we go, I finally take out the enemy general. And soon my opponent is going to start to, you know, I think he realized he's dead, but he's going to keep up the fight for a little bit before admitting defeat. Crossbowmen are also a very good investment. They have good armor penetration, and as you saw, let's try and take a look at some of these clumps. I think these guys were targeted by my crossbowmen, so I can take out these heavy cavalry from a distance, and that's really how you want to use your crossbowmen. Make sure you use them on specific targets, high value targets, and really force your opponent to either, you know, take this fire or retreat. So that's where my opponent should have probably countered my crossbowmen with a couple of his excessive archer units who had really good range. But anyways, that's going to be it for the battle. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you get a sense of the thinking that goes on my part, how you could employ it, or if someone's using my strategy, how you could try and counter it. Anyways, that's going to be it for this battle. Hope to see you guys next time. Thanks so much.